Alrighty. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, folks. I think more people will join as we get started. Thanks a lot for coming Saturday morning. I know it's a long weekend and things like that. So we postponed. So first of all, welcome to the Pinot Meetup. I think we are having a meetup after a long time after COVID. So basically, I thought before Atri takes into the gory details of Pinot, I'll just go over like the Uber's journey to Pinot. How did we start? What are the various things we did before venturing into Pinot? And I think that should be interesting to most of you because a lot of you are coming from various startups. And the interesting thing here is that, I mean, whatever technology choices you make, right, that changes after a couple of years. And I mean, it's a good change. So if you are looking into various technology choices, I think that would be a good thing to find out how things have evolved over Uber. So yeah, so instead of like going into details of Pinot, which I'll let Atri drive, I'll just specifically start like what were the various choices we made over the last few years and where are we right now. Oh, can you just, yeah. Yeah, okay. So we will start a little bit about me. So I'm a senior, yeah. Oh, it's working. Yeah. So I was senior director at Uber. So I managed the platform teams. I joined about 3 months back. Before that, I have spent some time in big companies and small companies like Oracle, Facebook, Nutanix, Cubole, Cohesity. And I also had my own stint at open source. I was the first Apache, Hive PMC, etc. So, so yeah, again, going through the history, I mean, real-time analytics has always been important at Uber, right? I mean, if you go back, like the use cases were always there, be it to power the dashboards, be it to, I mean, all of us are familiar with search pricing and like the use cases are obvious, right? And to do the business analytics, etc. And over time, like as new businesses came in, like Eats, Uber for Business, all of them needed real-time analytics. And again, I mean, you can guess like value of a lot of the data goes down over time. So the usage has always been there. And what has changed is the scale has changed and more new use cases have been added over the years. So going back into the history, like I think few years back, I think 2017, and again, there are blogs for all these things if you go back. So we were mostly powered by memsql, and it was working in like 2017-ish timeframe. And a lot of the critical dashboards at Uber were powered by memsql. At that time, when the scale was probably less than one tenth of where we are today, even then it had a significantly large footprint, probably order of hundreds of machines. So although it was working, the thing that was the problems were we were essentially using a service and we were just chatting with few people like what are the benefits and advantages of using a service. Obviously it's easier, you don't need to build in-house expertise, easier to get started. But all of us know that if you have run a service at scale, it can be very, very expensive. And we were using like third-party licensing, so it was very expensive. We did not have any in-house expertise or support, so we had a huge dependency on the vendor. And think about it. I mean, the cost would have linearly scaled. So if our scale had become like 10 times from like 5 years back, if we were using the same service, our cost would have become 10 times. Sure, there would have been some optimizations along the way, but still, it would have been prohibitively expensive. And that is what looked us to look for other options. This probably effort started in 2018-19. And then I think two lines of thought emerged independently. One was ArisDB, which was started at Uber, and the other was Pinot, which was started at LinkedIn, and both of them had their own journeys. So before diving into like how did we eventually land up into Pinot to a large extent, I just wanted to spend some more time in the intermediate stage, which was ArisDB. So around 2018 or 2019, I think we pretty much migrated away from memsql, and then we distributed our load, the real-time analytics load, both between ArisDB and Pinot. ArisDB, the advantage was it was fully in-house developed. It was GPU powered. And again, there's a blog here. If you search for Uber blogs on ArisDB, you will find more details here. It was much better than the previous memSQL cluster that we were running. Although it was on GPU, which was significantly expensive, but if I compare with the previous memSQL cluster, it had significantly reduced cost. And of course, since it was developed at Uber, the in-house expertise was very high. To a large extent, it was serving the traffic. I mean, as you can see on the slides, we were doing decent on the SLAs. So it was definitely a step in the right direction, definitely much better than where we were. And slowly we migrated most of our workloads from MSQL to either RSDB or Pinot. So in RSDB, although it was much better, the problems that we ran into, right? First of all, it required deep GPU expertise. So that became very, very difficult operationally. So I think that was the single biggest thing that looked us or that was in favor of Pinot, right? So although it was working, it was very difficult operationally to maintain. And although we had written like a Presto front end to both RSDB and Pinot, most of RSDB, they were still using the config languages, custom languages to use RSDB properly. It had a high adoption cost. The ETLs had to be in Go. Queries had to be written in custom query language. And because of GPU or whatever reasons were, it was like open source, but it did not see a lot of adoption comparatively outside Uber. So overall, what we saw was Pinot as a community was thriving much more as compared to RSDB. So in like 2019-ish timeframe, where we were roughly equally divided between RSDB and Pinot, over the last 2 years or so, essentially we have been migrating completely away from RSDB and moving to Pinot. So the current state is all the use cases of real-time analytics of Uber have been migrated to Pinot. Not only that, I mean, not only the scale has improved like multiple times from where we were a few years back, all the new use cases are also now coming to Pinot. So Pinot is pretty much the single driver which is powering all the use cases of Uber, right? So as like again, Atri will talk more about it, but just a very very high level thing. I mean, the main things that helped here was it was a very thriving community. So and it was running on like simple hardware, commodity hardware. It was much easier to operate and manage. I think that was the killer point that really helped to drive Pinot. So little bit about Pinot. As I said, there are a wide variety of use cases that are supported. New use cases are coming every time. I just wanted to talk about few of the features that we as have contributed. So basically, it's not that we are only using Pinot. We are actually contributing a lot in Pinot. And that helps us a lot. So some of the we have committers, and Atri being one of them, both in India and US, where we have committers in Pinot, and we are actually actively contributing to Pinot. So some of the features in Pinot that have been contributed by Uber, just wanted to list out like upsert, geospatial, and dimension tables. Specifically wanted to call out upsert. I think this is one of the most widely adopted features at Pinot, which is used outside industry also, outside Uber also. So this is like essentially think of it this way, right? I mean, you're taking a ride and the status changes from let's say waiting to riding or done, etc. So instead of creating a new row, you can obviously change the status of the row and then get much better analytics. So this features have been basically contributed by Uber, and it's been used heavily outside Pinot also. Sorry, outside Uber also. So right now we have like engineering teams both in India and US for Pinot. We are expanding a lot, and all the new use cases are coming to Pinot. So with that overview, I think let's take the questions at the end. Instead of doing that, I would pass it on to Atri. And of course, customary to say we are hiring, we are growing a lot, and thanks a lot for joining. And we'll be around after Atri's talk to take any more detailed questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Amit. All righty, let me find my presentation if I can. Okay. Right, that's me. All right. Works.
Okay, thank you for joining, folks. Really appreciate it, as Namit said, and thank you, Namit, for giving the intro. Uh, so, I'll build on what Namit's already told you guys, that the context is already set. I'll go into a bit of details of what or how we use Pinot at Uber. Some overlap with what Namit's already described in terms of what features we've done, and a bit into we'll go a bit into the specific use cases that are considered as big wins that we have implemented on top of Pinot. For a bit like there'll be some slides on just general Pinot architecture, because some of us might not be that well aware of how Pinot operates or what a Lambda architecture is. Um, we'll go into some of those details, and then again, this is an open house. I really wanted this session to be more of an interactive part where you guys just ask questions or maybe share some more use cases around Pinot, because after all, this is about how we all love Pinot or want to know more about it. So I don't know what's again wrong with this. Yeah, I mean, it works intermittently. Oh, okay. No, no, that's fine. I think it works. Thank you. So yeah, brief about me. I basically lead the search Pinot and Ping teams in Bangalore. I've been doing open source for a very long time. And yes, I am a Pinot committer. Some of you might know me from the guy who built the recent text search index for Pinot. And also I've been focusing a bit more on aggregations and overall performance. Like, how do you do selective aggregations? How do you push down aggregations to specific nodes, and bringing more of SQL-ish capabilities to Pinot. So again, as I said, we'll be talking about Apache Pinot, some of our requirements at Uber. And these requirements are not specific to us, right? A lot, when you see these requirements, you will definitely resonate with them, because maybe all of them or some of them will be applicable to how you want to implement real-time analytics, and how we use Pinot at Uber, and then the scale, and also some stuff that we have already done or are looking to do. So yeah, Pinot at a glance, I think this is more of from a perspective of what Pinot does. And these numbers are sort of growing right now. I think Pinot is scaling even more with some of the recent architectural changes we've made. But it's very fast if you know the right indexes to use. It does a very high performance aggregation, and it has the famous StarTree index, which allows you to pre-aggregate data if you know what you're dealing with, and you can also compute small aggregations using minion jobs. Again, not going into details, but nevertheless, aggregation is super fast there. And then we have things like pre-materialization. We have things like segment optimizations. We have the capability to actually have different schemas across different segments, different indexes across different segments, which really makes Pinot very scalable and easy to use, right? So one of the points that Navit made was that Pinot is very easy to use, and not just from our historical perspective, but also from a comparative perspective, right? So if you compare things like Druid or ClickHouse, right, they are not that easy to run. And what we have seen in recent times is that people who just want to integrate with real-time analytics need that ease of usage, right? They need the ease to set up an ingestion pipeline in not more than a few days, right? Or have their aggregations running seamlessly. Sometimes, okay, some engines might do some things faster, but that trade-off might not be worth it. So I think Pinot as a project has really focused on ease of usability. And that is a driving factor in adoption, not just at Uber, but even across the industry. And these are some of the companies that are predominantly using Pinot, and this list continues to grow. I think Apple, Cisco, this list doesn't mention Cisco, but Cisco has a few petabytes of data in Pinot now, and they recently gave a talk about it. And then I think more and more use cases are moving to Pinot now. So again, a very brief overview of Pinot's high-level architecture. I think some of us might be aware of it, but for the general good, I think we have, and fair warning, this architecture is changing slightly now because we're moving to a multi-stage execution model, but it's still far, so I'm not going to talk about that. But you have a broker node, you have two types of servers, there's a real-time server and an offline server. So in Pinot, you can create multiple types of tables. You can create a real-time table. You can create an offline table. Then you have a controller which operates on Zookeeper. And on top of Zookeeper, there's a layer of something called Apache Helix. Helix is basically, we think of it as a control plane built on top of Zookeeper, because Zookeeper is not that, it's not that really easy to execute with. So Helix allows you to use a control plane model and abstracts away a lot of complexity of dealing and running Zookeeper nodes. And then you have something like the segment store, and segment store can basically be, it can be tiered. You can have, like, it can place segments in your local D1, D2 nodes, or you can fetch segments from S3. Really, it's because that allows you to have a very cost-effective tiering model in Pinot, which is very popular. And then, so you can basically ingest data from either data in motion, which is real time, Kafka, Event Hub, Kinesis, or you can build your segments as a batch job, which is, data at rest moves into ingestion job. Those segments are built, and you can actually push pre-built segments into Pinot. So one of the advantages of Pinot is that it allows you to combine data from both of these aspects. So you get best of both the worlds, right? You're getting data from Kafka as well as you're getting a historical data. So that is a feature that is actively used, and then combined with tiering, basically like, moving data as it ages out between different layers of storage. These features come together to provide a very powerful yet cost-effective analytics story, and that allows multiple use cases or different kind of use cases to move to Pinot. Yeah, and as I said, this is the real-time pipeline. This is the batch pipeline. Both of them writing to the same server, just same cluster, just with different server types. So yeah, somehow I'll just see if I can just load some of these slides. So again, this is a real-time data flow. So that's Kafka. And then the data moves to Pinot controller. Then we have a segment mapping in the Zookeeper. Again, when I say Zookeeper, it's a mix of Zookeeper and Helix, but the data does live in Zookeeper. And then that segment mapping gets stored there, and the data actually lives on Pinot servers. And when the query hits, when the query comes in, it goes to the Pinot broker. And as we will see, it basically will talk to Helix and understand which nodes host the segments that this query cares about. And then the query will be broadcasted to those Pinot servers. Right. This is the offline flow. Again, we have the segment store here. Typically, people use one of these two technologies, either Spark or Flink, to ingest their raw data, build the segments, and then push those segments into the segment store. Again, the mapping remains the same. The raw data also marks its segment space into the Pinot controller and associated in the Zookeeper. And then the Pinot broker does the same thing. So a point to highlight here is that in terms of the overall flow, the difference between real time and batch is minimal, right? I mean, only the data flow part changes. But the segment structure, the segment location, the segment mapping, or how the query part of it, the Pinot broker really interprets and distributes queries, doesn't change. And that is very powerful because it allows Pinot to, again, go across real time and batch, right? You don't really have to worry about, okay, is my query going to hit real time? Is my query going to hit batch? Do I have to do something special about it? Is there some special syntax? Nothing of that sort. As long as you have configured your table type correctly, you have set up your ingestion pipelines correctly, Pinot will take care of the rest, right? So it is Pinot's job to ensure that your data is, your queries are sent to the right servers, your data is brought back in the right format, and then aggregated and sent back to you. So, like I said, highlighting on the point again, this makes combining historical data as well as real-time data a real breeze. So again, bit on the Pinot segment. The Pinot segment is basically a column-derived model. We have the raw data, and so then we have the raw data. We have the column-based system here. We have different kind of indexes, right? So we have the sorted index. We have the columnar index. We have the StarTree index. Here it comes. And then we also have the text index. I don't know if it's in the slides, but yeah, the thing is, a Pinot segment can contain multiple kind of indexes. And when a Pinot server is executing a query on its underlying segment, it will figure out what is the best type to execute it, right? So maybe a segment has a StarTree index, but another segment does not. that doesn't really change the fact that both of them can serve the same query, but one segment will do it faster, right? And that is why we, when I say we as a Pinot community, actively advise users to figure out what are the best kind of indexes that will work for them, because an index can really change the performance of a query. And that's why if you have the right thing at the right index or the right segment, Pinot will take care of using that index or ensuring that your query gets the maximum performance out. Thank you. So yeah, some of the examples of the index we have. And if you just want to see like the raw data is represented here, and the StarTree index basically a pre-aggregation model. So again, a Pinot segment anatomy. This goes a bit more into details of how a segment looks like, but as I was talking, right, you have the physical columns in index container, virtual column index container. We have a Pinot data buffer, which is again generic. So the part that you see on the left is basically, it's applicable to any Pinot segment, regardless of what index type you're using. And then the customizable part is this. These are all the kind of indexes that we support today, and this list is growing. But you can basically configure your data to create any of these kind of indexes at your segment level, and they will be stored within your segment. So, there is nothing special that you have to do, or there's nothing special that Pinot does in terms of storing these indexes. These indexes have, when you implement any kind of index, you have to define how it gets merged into your segment, how it basically uses the compound file format, and how it gets read up in the Pinot reader layers. So that really abstracts you, the user, away from any atrocities of defining specific file types or configuring specific directories for indexes. All that doesn't happen. You just have to specify it in the configuration, and Pinot takes care of the rest. So now we'll get a bit into what Uber's been doing in terms of real-time analytics and why we care about Pinot. This is a Forrester report that is how the value of data changes over time. And as Namit was saying, as data gets older, it loses value. And that is a property that is critical to systems like Pinot or anything that is depending on time series data. So, I say the time critical decisions move from actionable to reactive to historical as time passes. And this is, you can use this property for basically defining your tiering or ensuring that your older data lives in storage that is cheaper, but is still accessible. So like S3, right? So to achieve this sort of a model or to completely utilize this sort of a pattern, you need your engine to understand this property. And that is what Pinot does. So some of the things that we care about are real-time analytics in business. So, yes, at Uber, given the fact that most of our business is real-time, we really care about real-time and actionable insights, right? How many rides are we doing in certain regions? What's our overall SLA? Even for our internal services, right? What are our P1 service performances? How are we hitting SLAs or not? How many L1, L2 issues have we seen? So in terms of Uber Eats, if you're a Uber Eats restaurant, you have this dashboard which will constantly update on how many orders you have served, or what is your, which is your favorite item, which is the most popular item, and which is the item that is now trending, where are your stocks low, how are you doing against your competitors. All of that data is constantly aggregated and presented to you in real time. And I said demand supply management is something that is very critical to Uber's business and is powered by real-time analytics. And then another thing, right? For example, the freight carrier scorecard. So you can imagine, right? As a company, we have most of our businesses running on real-time data. And the more real-time analytics we can get, or the fresher real-time analytics we can get, the better for us, because then the decisioning engines that work on top of that data can actually make aggressive decisions or correct decisions that are not a thing of the past, right? So the fresher the result that we get from this system, the better decisions we can make. So you imagine, right? I mean, demand supply management, if it needs data as fresh as possible. If it has data which is 10 minutes old, then we've already lost some element of, or we've already lost some wins that we could have achieved. So that's why this system is this paradigm is very crucial to Uber. Yes, fast access to fresh data at scale, right? That's basically what we live by. So some things are, these are things that we care about when we look at a system, right? And this is again true across everything that Namit talked about. When we use MemSQL, RSDB, Pinot, Anything on this planet, we always judge the system by these metrics. So we care about performance, high throughput, low latency, easy to scale. Again, we don't want to spend a lot of time just adding nodes physically if we want to go up. Cost has to be optimal because, given our scale, we don't want to spend a lot of data just at the storage level. Easy to operate, right? One of the biggest things here is that the plethora of use cases at Uber is immense, right? And that keeps growing every week. So now, if we were not to have a system which were easy to onboard, to even have self onboarding, right? We would spend a lot of time just onboarding these use cases, and that would hit the velocity of how fast can those businesses move to market, right? And that is something which is not acceptable at our scale or at our velocity. And secondly, yes, even from a platform team perspective, if most of us are always busy in onboarding use cases, that is not a good use of our time. So yes, easy to operate, easy to manage, easy to onboard is something that we absolutely require. Then ecosystem, right? How do we integrate from the rest of Uber's data stack? How do we ingest from the variety of data sources that we have at Uber? And then, rich features. We need full-fledged SQL because many of our folks don't really want to go and learn a custom language. As Namit said, right? One of the problems with RSDB was that people had to use AQL, the RSDB query language. And it was not very intuitive to learn because most of us are used to SQL, right? So the closer to the SQL system is, the better it is for all of us. And that ties back to the easy to operate, easy to onboard metric. Again, as Namit said, ability to update is something we really care about because a lot of our data is mutable and is very volatile, right? I mean, things change a lot. Some data is still static, but some data is very volatile. So we need the ability to keep up with those updates and not if you think about a LSM tree model, right? We cannot always depend on a log-based system to give us an eventually correct answer, or conversely, scan a lot of data just to get to the latest value, right? So that's why a pure LSM model or pure log event model does not really work for Uber. It does for some use cases, but then for some it does not, right? So our system, whatever we choose for real-time analytics, need to support both of them. So again, this is what we have eventually ended up with, and this is our status quo. So we have data sources, we have our internal pipelines, then we have Pinot for storage. We use Presto for querying, and then we have our visuals and dashboards on top. And we now actually have self-service onboarding here. So people actually have a nice looking portal where they can sign up and they can create their own Pinot clusters, deploy them, and start using them without any interference from the Pinot or the RTA team. And this was, again, as Namit said, 2018, 2019 was a time frame when we built this. And this is a combination of Pinot and Presto. Presto is primarily used for querying because Pinot still doesn't have full SQL capability, but we are getting there. And we have seconds data freshness. And this is the scale that we are looking at in terms of Pinot today. And again, this slide is a couple of days old, so I'm sure we must have grown past this number as well. But with this entire pipeline, I think we've kind of achieved what we set out to look at. Now, this Pinot allows us to do self-service. It allows people to run their own Pinot clusters with minimal hand-holding from the Pinot team. And then that helps the Pinot team really focus on improving the overall ecosystem, improving the overall platform, and also improve the product, right? So as Namit explained, and as you'll see in the community, Uber is one of the biggest contributors to Pinot alongside LinkedIn and a couple of other companies. So as a Pinot team, we do really focus on enhancing the platform rather than keeping the lights running. There is an aspect of keeping the lights running, but that continuously goes down thanks to the engineering efforts that we have put here and thanks to the fact that Pinot is such an easy system to use. Then again, some Pinot use case enablers that we did care about. The ones in bold are basically contributed by Uber, but these are the things that we looked at. This is the metric table that we really used to make this decision. And we have a plethora of use cases, right? User-facing applications, dashboarding, OI, BI, visualization, ad hoc exploration, and log analytics, right? And these are the metrics, or these are the capabilities that these systems require. And this is what Pinot really provides. Some of it was not provided earlier, but then Uber contributed. But net, Pinot has all of these capabilities now. And as you can see, Pinot checks most of the boxes, right? I mean, you can basically go with indexing. You have StarTree for pre-aggregation. You have inverted sorted range for different kind of normal queries. You have text indexes. And in fact, text indexing is now also moving into operational intelligence at Uber. And then geospatial, as you can imagine, right? Most of our services require geospatial capabilities, then JSON, Bloom filter, uh, dimension lookup joins, and some more stuff. Example, now we're working on a query cost model. So basically, Pinot doesn't have the concept of a query cost, but we at Uber are working at defining something where we can cost a query based on what is the estimated selectivity that the query will be looking at, also the size of segments that is be scanning, and then accordingly, also combine it with cyclomatic complexity to estimate what will be the cost of executing a given query at a given point in time, and then accordingly make a decision of whether to execute it or not. So I think the TLDR is that Pinot really checks off a lot of check boxes for us, and that is why at Uber we have really been striving to move to Pinot, or the overall Pinot Presto pipeline, as a single source of truth for most of our real-time analytics or real-time actionable insights use cases. Again, a bit of a context around what we really looked at, and again, this list keeps changing. I know ClickHouse is working on a better text search model, but some of them, this list more or less is true to some extent today, and that is why this also led to our decision of investing more in Pinot. And again, as I said, Pinot is a jack of all trades. It is master of some, but and in the place it is not a master, it does a good enough job, and it also allows us to improve things. So I think, yes, Pinot has always provided the most well-rounded experience, or the most well-rounded capability set to us, or to the general industry, and that's why Uber has invested in Pinot quite a lot. Again, some more details of the comparative analysis that we did. Some of you might resonate with it, and we can obviously go deeper into it after this talk. But yeah, I'll just give you guys a second to read through it. Nothing really to explain here, and don't want to rile any buckets here. So just read through it, and then we can discuss it later. But again, as you say, Pinot has most greens here, and that's why Pinot is what we're discussing today. So I'll quickly go through a couple of use cases that we have enabled on Pinot. So the Uber Ads platform is completely powered by Pinot. It was built in less than 12 months. It started, we were initially using a third-party vendor there, but then we started building our own in March 2020. We built exactly once event processing with the Flink team. So Flink plays a very important role here. Then we launched our own solution. We on July 1st, we gave them a notice, and we moved out of that platform completely. So now today the Uber Ads platform is completely powered by Pinot. There's no third-party dependency, and we are able to see a much better latency, and we're able to scale in an easier fashion. So yeah, this is one use case that we always showcase as something that is powered by Pinot. Again, these are some of the metrics that we're looking at. The second is, the Uber Eats Restaurant Manager, which is basically, what you look at. If you ever have, looked at a new Restaurant Manager page, most of us have not, but this is basically what people see when they look at this dashboard. So the conversion funnel, real-time customer feedback, top selling menus, as I was mentioning earlier, this is all powered by Pinot. People basically are using this in a day-to-day life, and you can imagine, right? This kind of insights really help a restaurant decide its future strategy, right? I mean, right from what I'm going to focus on tomorrow to how much am I going to invest in the next 6 months, right? So this data is crucial for our customer restaurant partners in advancing their businesses, and that's why this Uber Eats use case was very crucial. The fact that we could make it happen on Pinot is something that we are very proud of. Yeah, again, this was adopted very with a very high velocity, and we basically saw people really take to this new platform that we built. And now we have a central UI out of our history, and we have performance metrics, we have real-time feedback. All of this really helps people also drive more about how much should we invest in ads. People hook this up to their ads pipeline, to their delivery pipeline. So I think the overall ecosystem with this real-time insights is growing, and that's why we do see our restaurant partners generating a higher degree of revenue with this platform. again, this is something that we worked in during the COVID-19 phase when we were recovering from COVID. I think this Sharon platform, again, there's an engineering blog about it that has a link. And we took the Sharon platform to help our restaurant partners reopen and basically understand how can we identify and enable our partners to reopen. And this was this was rolled out in May 2020, and we saw a huge upliftment here because we could see our enterprise stores taking up, getting back online really fast. So again, one of the thing here is that is a time sensitive decision because we were losing revenue here, our partner were losing revenue here, so we really had to move fast. And yeah, this is something that, again, Sharon is a pretty complex subject, so I would recommend that you go through the blog. But this was all powered by Uber, and this really helped restaurants get back on track. Again, all through real-time decisioning systems. So I think we went through a lot of content quickly. So I thank you for the patience, and I think I'll be happy to take questions now, or we can probably interact in person right after this call.
What is the trade-off of choosing Pinot over Druid? Because Druid is extensively used and implemented across industries. And when Pinot supported upserts, because that's something interesting. When I was evaluating all those tools, and that time my impression was Pinot was not supporting upserts.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of comparing with Druid, again, we can go back to the slide, but Druid has a higher operational cost. So onboarding to Druid is a bigger challenge, right? Just setting up an ingestion pipeline. So first off, getting a Druid cluster to be stable and not go down every day is an uphill task. Second biggest challenge with Druid is setting an ingestion pipeline. So getting data from various sources into Druid as a singular source of truth is very hard. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we saw at Uber, because we have a disparate list of data sources that we need to ingest from, both real time and batch. So that's why Druid did not work for us. So, and third, this also hampered our ability to be self-serve and allow users to basically create their own clusters without handholding from the Pinot side or the RTA team. So these were the three main things that drove us away from Druid. In terms of Upsert is, as Namit said, one of the biggest features that Uber contributed. I think it was contributed a year and a half back and released as a part of, if I'm not wrong, Pinot 0.7 or 0.8. But yeah, it's been there for a while, and many companies, even outside of Uber, actively use Upsert. And Upsert is a feature that is constantly touted as something that makes Pinot different from its competitors, and also is growing. Like, we are actively enhancing Upsert, and not just us. I mean, even other companies are actively contributing to Upsert. So it is a stable feature that's been there for, I think, a year now.
And it does support the Lambda architecture, right?
Yes.
You can have big data push through batch layer.
Yes, you can.
Hi, this is Srini here. I have a question. Somewhere you mentioned that Flink was instrumental, but I think I didn't understand that part right very well. Was in the case study section that you talked about, right? I mean, is that Flink underlying? I mean, where is it actually being used here?
So yeah, so Flink is being used as the transformation and ingestion pipeline. So for real-time data, sometimes what happens is that, for example, we might need to join from multiple streams, or I need to enrich the data before it lands into Pinot. So Flink is our workhorse there, and we extensively use Flink for getting those streams or getting that data in absolute real time, performing those transformation, enrichments, joins, and whatever the final form of data is, and then pushing it into Pinot, because Pinot supports native ingestion from Flink. So yeah, when I've said Flink there, Flink is, from a Pinot perspective, Flink is primarily the transformation and ingestion layer.
Okay, but all the aggregations happen in Pinot, right? And not like some aggregations get...
No. The aggregation always happen in Pinot.
Okay.
The enrichment can happen in Flink.
Got it, thanks.
Somebody, yeah.
So my question is regarding, so you were mentioning something about a platform that people can use to create Pinot clusters.
That's correct.
Although Pinot already supports multi-tenancy. So
yes,
my question essentially is, do you use the multi-tenancy? Like when you mean create a cluster, is it a separate cluster created for different teams, and why not use multi-tenancy?
So basically, that's a good question. So we have both kind of clusters. So some, it depends on the criticality of the use case, the size of the use case, and also there are some security regulations, or there are some, for example, some teams like customer excellence have multiple use cases that they want to enable. So they have like multiple clusters which are multi-tenant in themselves, right? So at Pinot, at Uber, we do not have a singular policy of saying that, okay, we are only going to use multi-tenancy, or we are only going to deploy reserved clusters. It's a mix of both. So that's why it was essential that we have a way of allowing people to define what kind of cluster, what kind of strategy they want to use, instead of us going and enabling it for them every time. So yeah, we do use multi-tenancy, but not always. We do have reserved clusters as well.
I see. So as I understand, it's more about the operational perspective.
Yes.
Rather than a limitation in multi-tenancy.
No. You're right. It's not a limitation multi-tenancy at all. It's from a usability perspective, right? You're right. Operational perspective, and also this ease of onboarding to Pinot for a team that is not accustomed to working with a system like that, right? I mean, imagine a business team. They are not looking to get into deep and details of Pinot. They're looking to get their real-time data served, right? So from a user perspective, we wanted to make it easy for them to just use Pinot, to deploy Pinot in the minimal time possible, and just get on with their business, not focus on Pinot, but on the data.
Just another question. So I remember you talked about cost-based query
model
planning. Right?
Yes.
So could you elaborate a little bit there? Are you using cost-based models to determine, like, choose which query plan to use, or are you? I think you said we use the cost to determine whether or not to execute this.
Yes. So you're right. So first of that feature is still in development, and in fact, I am the one who's writing it, so I'm happy to talk more about it. But yes, currently we use cost-based models to determine whether or not to run a query. So, given the current state of a Pinot cluster, we want to speculatively understand if firing this query will cause a broker outage or not, or cause a worker node degradation or not, right? So we try to estimate that even before the query enters system, because once it enters, we'll have to cancel it, or we'll have to basically recover some resources, which is a harder task, right? So yeah, we use that cost model to estimate the chances of a query first succeeding, or secondly, causing a damage to the overall ecosystem. But to answer your question, we are looking into a model where we will use that cost to choose plans or choose plan options for a single query. And that also depends on the feature that is coming in Pinot, which is called the multi-stage query execution. Because right now, if we look at if we look at Pinot's architecture, right, there's nothing really to choose from. I mean, each query has a specific set of rules that you're dealing with. But Pinot is moving towards a multi-stage execution where they will have the ability to do joins, or they will have the ability to loop in feedback from different parts of the query. And that is where we will plug in a query cost model to allow different, like imagine a two-phase query optimizer where the logical query optimization is global. We define like the standard rewrites and basically define an abstract logical tree that gets pushed down to each worker node. And then each worker node will decide the physical query plan based on the segments that it's using. And that's crucial because Pinot supports heterogeneous segments, right? So I mean, a segment on a node might have a StarTree index, and the other segment might not. So the query plans on both will look very different. So that's why we are moving to that model, and that is where Pinot is evolving towards.
Yeah, good to know. Just one last question I had. I just had listed them down. So I remember reading a lot of Uber engineering blogs wherein primarily for log analytics, a lot of ClickHouse was being used.
Yes.
So is that still the case? I mean, probably outdated, but is that still the case? Or are there like pros and cons that you would use one system for logging and another for like actual real time? Or is that changing?
And then that's a fair question. I would say it's in a bit of a mid state right now. So yes, we do have ClickHouse workloads, and they're primarily for log analytics. But we're also slowly pushing Pinot in that world. So one thing is that Pinot has some capabilities which are unique to it, or which make it a favorable choice over ClickHouse. For example, text search, right? But historically, ClickHouse has been used at Uber, and we still have use cases. I'm not saying we are deprecating it, but I would say people now have a choice. When I want to, like, as a business team in Uber, if I want to start a new log analytical framework, or if I have a log analytical use case, I have a choice now. And we have seen people go in either way. And there are there are metrics of decision there that I probably cannot share in this forum. But to answer your question, we have both of them right now. So Pinot does serve some log use cases today.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, hi, good morning. Uh, so this Pinot tool work best for text analytics. Have you seen any use case for financial data modeling and analytics related to financial data? Basically,
Absolutely. I think not at Uber, but outside of Uber, people do use it for financial modeling. I forgot the name of the company which does that, but yes, we definitely have seen people use stock price or historical trends or even forecasting as an input point to Pinot, and then make some decisioning. So yes, absolutely, there are financial use cases that are running on top of Pinot.
right. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes.
So we are using Elasticsearch for a good amount of time, and also we are using geospatial intelligence with Elasticsearch. And mostly this is kind of a batch processing based data, and we don't have any real-time use cases. So if I want to switch back, or if I want to convince myself and my management to use Pinot, so what are the use cases from the geospatial side?
I think if you use Elasticsearch, you must have, and if you're in GeoSpat, you must have seen a couple of things. You must have seen a lot of span out. Like, Elasticsearch basically is firing your query to all your possible segments. And you must have seen things like split brain and, the aggregator node going out of memory. So the first thing that Pinot will give you is a much more resilient framework. The chances of a Pinot node going down are much lesser than Elasticsearch just because of the architecture. The second thing is Pinot's geospat capabilities are pretty much on par with what Elasticsearch offers. But given the fact that it is only one of the capabilities that Pinot does, you will have full SQL support. You will have the ability to do more stuff. Like tomorrow, if you want to use the same data for some sort of a range query or some sort of a fancy aggregation, you can do that without any changes to your ingestion pipeline. You just need to enable a couple of new indexes. So yeah, I recommend people when these kind of questions are always predominant, right? Even in the community. My stand is that if you don't need the full text search capabilities of Elasticsearch, and when I say FTS, I'm referring to the ranking, retrieval, scoring models, right? If you're not doing that, then anything else will be done better on Pinot, because Pinot offers pretty much the same capabilities and more, but in a more resilient fashion. So yeah, to answer your question, you will get a more resilient framework with a lot more capabilities should you want to use them. And in your current use case, I'm pretty confident that Pinot can match whatever you're doing today with Elasticsearch.
So Elasticsearch has certain limitations. So if you take one record, we cannot have more than 1,000 fields in a
Yes.
single record.
Yes.
We can have, but they are recommending to limit by 1,000. So what kind of limitations we have here?
I mean, it depends on the kind of schema you use, but there are ways to get around it. I mean, the point is, if you have more than 1,000 fields, for example, we can definitely make it happen. We'll have like a split schema, or we'll basically make it in a parent-child form. There are ways to deal with that, but it is possible. That's what I'm saying. But the thing is, if you scale up to that level, any system will see performance problems. The more the number of fields you have, the worse performance degradation you'll see. But having said that, because of the fact that Pinot is a columnar system, you will not see that level of degradation, because eventually in Elasticsearch, you will be storing data on Lucene segments, which are not really optimized for these kind of scenarios. But for Pinot, given the way we store segments, or given the fact that you can choose how to structure your data on your leaf nodes, I think this problem is much less amplified. So yes, even if you have more than 1,000 fields, I think Pinot will do well.
So you have mentioned one of your slide, geospatial indexing, which is
Yes.
supported by Pinot, not
Yes.
by Elastic.
Yes.
So what does it mean exactly?
So geospatial index basically allows you to, again, we can talk more about it later, but geospat index basically allows you to create, let's say, locational inference, like Verona diagrams. And suppose you want to triangulate, right? If you want to imagine an Uber use case, right? Give me all the restaurants within 5 miles of my current location. Those kind of use cases will be served well by geospatial indexes, because then it will allow you to create range queries or locational queries that are really fast, right? So imagine sort of a multi-dimensional KD tree stored within your segment. So I think the ability to do locational queries becomes much faster with something like a geospatial index. And you can also, as I said, do range queries or lat longitude queries, and they typically are pretty fast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think cost. Yeah, the question is, was cost the only reason for migrating out of MemSQL, or was it also performance in terms of concurrency and query latency? Cost was the initial driving factor, but then as we migrated away, we did see an improvement in latencies for some of our use cases. Again, MemSQL is pretty fast in what it does well, but in a general thing, I think we did see a better query latency, and we also saw more flexibility in terms of how we can store and structure our data. So yes, we were able to also, and concurrency was a big thing. I think we were able to see a higher concurrent load done with a lesser number of nodes, or an equivalent concurrent load equivalent concurrent load done with a lesser number of nodes, right? So yes, I think the overall performance latency went down, and we were able to scale better in terms of concurrent loads just with a smaller cluster. So eventually that did turn out to be a win in entirety, just not in terms of cost, but also in terms of ease of scalability and performance.
Hi, this is Jashwan. So we have a limited data source. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. We have a limited data source, and we are using Google Analytics and Splunk from a long time.
Okay.
So can this one also in the similar line, or something different, or because of the data source, or how can?
What is your data source?
It's like a simple logs and some queries we put on the. We have a B2B business, okay, and there it just for putting your script, it will take the data source. So we are not throwing any data source to the Google Analytics. It will take automatically. So yeah,
I think it should work well. Again, it will not be a one-to-one mapping, but if you have simple data logs from a source that can probably push to Kafka or something, I think Pinot will do well. Depends on what kind of queries you're doing, but if it's pure play log analytics, I'm pretty confident that Pinot will work for you.
but here, what the benefit of over Splunk and Google Analytics, because that also is a similar work.
I think you'll find this cheaper.
Okay. And another question. So in Google Analytics, we are not throwing the data. So suppose I was working on a healthcare industry, and their data, sending the data is also a problem because they have a PI data, a lot of sensitive data. So are this, this one is taking all the data to their system, or we have to dump all the data, or it will without data also work?
So you will have to. Did I interrupt somebody? Okay. So you will have to store data into Pinot, right? So Pinot is not the source of truth in the sense that you can actually remove your data as soon as you're done. You can have TTL, and you can be, or you can just have like a minion job which purges your entire table after 10 minutes. But will Pinot work on data that is not in the system? That doesn't really work, because Pinot will have to build its segments and then operate on top of them. Pinot will build its indexes and basically store them, right? So yes, that part of data will reside within Pinot, but you can get rid of it because, as I said, right, Pinot never tries to be the source of truth. So you can basically have your data in whatever form and shape you want. You can bring in the required data. You don't even need to get an entire data set here. You can bring in the required data, required columns into Pinot, get your analytics done, and then purge your table on a very regular basis. So I think that model should hopefully work for you, as long as you don't have a requirement that data should not touch the system at all. If it can live within the duration of execution, which is true for any system that is doing an analytical query, I think it will work for you.
And another question. So Uber itself have some PI data, like customer data. So when you're sending data to Pinot, so are you filtering that data before sending to them?
We do that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, one last question. Sorry, Srini here. Do you support like custom aggregation functions beyond those standard functions that is available within Pinot?
We do have, again, I'll have to look up the latest documentation, but we do have the ability to define UDFs from what I remember.
UDFs. Mhm.
But yeah, you can basically deploy your own UDFs and they can operate on top of your underlying index structures.
And then, but that is like, I mean, not super advised, right? Or is it
Yeah,
like,
not super advice. Yeah, I
okay.
mean, typically, I think most of the power user we have seen do well to use the existing aggregation functions, or they contribute back something which is even more powerful. UDFs have like any other system, UDFs have their own performance constraints, and sometimes they might not be super optimized for their underlying index structure. So
Yes.
yeah, we advise that you use them with caution.
Got it. Thanks.
Does Pinot support joins? When I say joins, basically you have two large data sets and trying to join them.
We do not support true blue joins, like what you use in SQL, like left outer, out outer. But we do have some form of joins in terms of lookup joins or collocated joins or dimension lookups, basically. And you can also simulate a join through Presto. So basically, you can fire a join query in Presto and internally translate it into two Pinot queries. Having said that, Pinot is coming up with native join support as a part of the multi-stage query execution framework that the community is working on. So probably in another release or so, Pinot will have native join support. But as of today, lookup join and a Presto-based join are your only two options.
Okay, so in that case, the reports what you generate, you always have a flattened table, one flattened table.
Yes.
And how wide it can support?
I'll have to look that up. I don't really
Because
remember.
actually we have a requirement where we have to give, let's say 3,000 columns, one white table.
We can 3,000 columns is insane, but we can talk about that. I think if we can definitely play around with just having a split table and using Presto on top for now, because the native join support is really close.
Okay. Now, does it support Azure ADLS and Google Cloud Storage for deep storage?
Yes, it does.
So it does.
It was actually, I think ADLS was very recently contributed. So yes.
Because actually the only reason we didn't use that time is because we knew that it only supports AWS S3 or SDFS.
I think you should reevaluate it given all your use case. Whatever concerns I'm hearing from you, should definitely reevaluate Pinot, at least the latest version, 0.10.
Okay. And it's productionized, right? So
it is productionized, yes. And you can ask me questions in office tomorrow.
I'll forget. So we use the heat of the moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a question regarding the segment storage part. Between POSIX compliant and non-compliant storage systems, have we experienced outside Uber also any performance advantage or concerns or any upcoming planned work?
No, I mean, that has been a question for a while, but to be honest, it has not generated enough use cases or causes for us to really go and investigate. So yes, I mean, typically POSIX compliant do work well. And, I think that was what LinkedIn started with, but yeah, I don't think there's been a lot of traction on that, or specifically optimizing for different storage structures. What are the underlying file system models? So there are, I mean, to be fair, there's an option of specifying or writing your own implementation of the underlying directory, which will use the optimal features of the file system you're working on, or running on. But beyond that, I don't remember seeing a lot of traction. Maybe there are groups that are focused on it, but not to my memory. Any other questions?
Can you hear me? This is Naveen from Connected Online.
Yeah, please.
Hello, can you hear me, Atri?
We can, yes, we can.
So being said, this is OL API data store. So could you share what are the good, business intelligence or open source business intelligence tools that works well on this Pinot data store? And you can also share some of your experiences on that in short. Yeah, thank you.
Naveen, is the question that is it integrated with Tableau or Google Studio, or is that your question? Can you repeat?
So I wanted, so my question is what are the business intelligence, open source business intelligence tools that works well with Pinot, and you can share some of the experiences if you have had a chance to integrate and see the data, building the dashboards and the performance, those experiences.
Yeah, I think Pinot supports a bunch of them. Google Studio for sure. And then I think Pentaho, Tableau, and all supported, even Eclipse Studio, if I'm not wrong. In terms of experience, I really don't have any experience of integrating with them. Maybe somebody in our audience will. But yeah, in terms of Spectrum, Pinot does support most major open source and some commercial, BI tools with native support. So yeah, I've seen them work well. That's for sure. I've definitely have had use case in the community where people are integrating and using them pretty happily. But I don't have any personal experience in integration or using them.
Okay, so do we find drivers available with Apache Superset?
Yes, you should. Yeah, I think there is documentation available on the how to integrate, or I think there's even a blog of integrating with Tableau. So you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually asking for Apache Superset.
Superset is supported. Yes, Superset is definitely supported. You should look it up. I can basically, after the call, we can go through and understand what use cases, but Superset is something that people do use with Pinot.
Thank you.
Hey Atri, it was a nice session. So I have a question that can we say that like currently, hello, am I audible?
You are. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, currently can we say that this database like is a mass like state of the art for operational intelligence and real-time analytics compared to ClickHouse or some other OLAP database?
Well, we definitely like to believe that. But
Okay,
yes,
so
I think in terms of overall completeness, if I did write a report, I think few months back about comparisons. But in terms of overall completeness, I think Pinot is there in a much better way. There definitely are advantages to engines like Druid or ClickHouse. For example, ClickHouse has a slightly higher performance in terms of using its inverted indexes, and Druid is native SQL support. But I think in overall ecosystem usage or how the community is thriving, I think Pinot is doing much better. So yes, we do like to believe that if you look at the overall score, Pinot, we like to believe that Pinot scores the highest, and also in terms of the velocity of development, Pinot is definitely faster than these communities. So whatever gaps Pinot has as a project are being actively filled by a variety of people and a variety of companies. So yes, we strongly believe that Pinot is and will continue to be the cutting edge of real-time analytic platforms.
got it. So so currently like I am working at local and we are using ClickHouse as analytics database there. So we use like a lot of advanced geospatial features in ClickHouse like polygon dictionaries and things like that for dynamically lookup queries. So does Pinot also support things like that?
Pinot does have a pretty advanced geospatial index, and it does support a plethora of geospatial queries. At Uber, we actively use it. So I will have to look up the specifics of the use case that you have, but I'm pretty confident that Pinot will be able to cover most of what ClickHouse is currently offering.
Okay. And how are you seeing the future? Like what's next for Pinot? Where is the direction that
I think, yeah, sure. Thank you. I think Pinot basically is looking at a journey where we are trying to be more SQL compliant and as well as be more query rich, as I said, right? So some of the things like the multi-stage query execution, the query cost model that we're working on are very crucial to this overall journey of not mandating people to use something like a Presto to query us. The second thing is, which is like something Uber is actively participating in, is Pinot's reliability. So Pinot is already fairly reliable, but we are looking at even taking it to the next level where Pinot is able to auto heal, or Pinot is able to predictively encapsulate what is hitting it or what is expected to take it down, right? So we are looking to build active defensive strategies within Pinot that can take live feedback or live metrics and then accordingly react. So that is something that is pretty cutting edge, and I don't think any other competing engine has that. But that is something that we as the Pinot community are moving towards. So let's say in a few releases, I expect Pinot to be fully SQL compliant, support things like joins, have even faster indexes, and be even more resilient to spikes or basically unexpected outcomes in your use case or in your workload. So yeah, Pinot will have adaptive defensive strategies in terms of stability, and also a wider set of query patterns that it can serve. Third is, as I said, right, the index space is growing. For example, the text index, we always use Lucene for text indexing, but now we have our own native text index that is built for time series data. So I think more of those things are coming to Pinot, which will accelerate its current capabilities even more, while expanding the spectrum in terms of SQL and other capabilities, and ensuring that the overall resiliency factor, the overall uptime that our customers see, keeps going up.
Cool. Thanks. It was I think the inspiration might have come from GCP services like Composer too, where these type of auto healing functions and have come up.
That is
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, I just wish we could charge as much as GCP does, but yeah.
Just out of curiosity to ask, is there any database which supports things like auto healing at the moment?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I think there might be some archaic databases that might do it, but most open source upstream databases do not.
Yeah, this would
Apache
be
Search
a
does it.
interesting to
Sorry, go ahead.
see
Yeah.
for sure.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying this would be an interesting thing to see in the future in the databases, that we have auto healing and auto increment and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Great.
think the overall space is moving towards that direction. I mean, if you look at systems like Postgres, they are looking to do that. But it's a matter of how many components you have, how complex they are, how much interactions they have, and how much can you decouple. So I think each engine will have its own journey, but sooner or later, most major engines will have some aspect of it. For example, like as somebody said, Elasticsearch. Right? Elasticsearch has some capabilities around live circuit breakers and some auto healing capabilities, which are fairly primitive, and they're not impossible to beat. Even Solar has some of that. But I think, yeah, all of them are evolving towards the same goal. So sooner or later, we will have some version of auto healing in most of these engines.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
I think we have a question here. Pinot installing is easy as Apache Spark, its space requires. I think that's a very hard question to answer. It is easier than Spark, in my opinion. I think we have the Uber Spark guy here. He can definitely vouch for it. But yeah, I think it's easier than Spark. And in terms of space requirement, it varies. It really depends on the cardinality of your data, how much data you're bringing, what are the kind of queries you want to run, what are the kind of indexes you have created, how many unique terms you have, it's how many columns you have, what are the data types. I think it's a decision or a factor of a myriad of different factors. So it's very hard to say. We are actually, now that you mention it, we are working on something which will allow you to estimate how much storage your segments are going to take based on some sampling of your data. Presto has something like this. I forgot what it's called, but we're also working on something, or at least designing something that should help with some of these estimates. But currently, it's mostly a factor of understanding your overall data set and then making an educated guess. Anything else that we can help you with, guys? Any further questions, comments? I think there's a commercial SaaS offering by StarTree, but it's a company called StarTree that does a commercial offering. I mean, it's happening in our office, but yeah. Yes, that's offered by Amazon. The only one we have right now is StarTree. So the StarTree has a managed service. Apart from that, I think, see, one of the factors with Pinot is that Pinot is not as hard to run as Elasticsearch. Right? For the record, I was a part of the AWS Elasticsearch team. So, and I have been working with Solar and Elasticsearch for a very long time. So I know those systems are a pain to manage, right? You have operational issues happening nearly every day. So Pinot, for the better or the worse, is much more easier to deploy and manage. So many a times, large enterprises don't see the value of having a managed service. That is not to say that I'm saying, don't use StarTree, of course, I love StarTree. They basically did send T-shirts, by the way, for this event, which never made it past customs. So, we'll probably do another meetup where you can collect your T-shirts. But yeah, essentially, I think at least from our experience, Pinot is so easy to use that we don't really require a managed service, and that is true for other companies as well. Having said that, Pinot is an upcoming system, is an upcoming platform, and people are now recognizing its value. So sooner or later, there will be more people who are chiming to give it as a service and basically offer a self-hosted platform that you can just do a few clicks on and use an API with. But as of now, I think StarTree is the only one. Yeah, just we should have checked that before letting him in. Just kidding.
Yeah. So I have one question. So does it
Can you
also
hold
have,
the mic a bit closer, please?
so does it also have support for caches? Does it cache query results?
To some extent. I mean, yes, we do have block level caches, but we did plan on having a query result cache for a while, but it hasn't been implemented yet. Because again, caching has pros and cons, right? If we have a cache, and the other thing is this time series data. So we don't really know the value of a query cache there, unlike a database, because the data would have probably moved on by the time the query hits again. And it also puts an additional load on the broker, which is at this point a single point of failure in the query path. So yes, we don't really have a query cache because we don't know the value of it, but we do have some block level caches that will actually help if you are if your query is kept scanning the same data again. One cache that we do have, which is pretty useful, is in terms of tiered storage. So if you have tiering between your data sources, and let's say we fetch a data block from S3, we will actually cache the entire S3 block in one of your D1, D2 nodes. So if you have, assuming temporal locality of your queries, the next query will not have to go to S3. It will have that block somewhere cached locally. So that is a very useful cache. And then we have some file system block caches. But query caching is not really something we have invested in because, for time series, it probably doesn't make much sense. It does, but I mean, yeah, you're right. It does to a certain extent, but when people talk of caches, they are like more of a key value lookup, right? You basically have a query, do a query fingerprinting, and you get results back. That's what query cache typically has meant when you talk in terms of relational databases. So yes, our mapping strategies does work in the same tune to some extent, but it's not a true query cache. So you're not really caching results block and associating them with a query. So that's the idea.
Yeah, also like on the mmap part, like generally speaking, there's been a lot of like people are critical of using mmaps for analytics, databases in general, right? Andy Pavlo is anti mmap guy. So where do you think we're going with that? Like,
I think it's it's like some of those things which you can't get rid of, right? A map has made its way so deep into our systems that we can't live with it, right? I mean, imagine loading a 20 GB segment without a map, right? Your Pinot data buffer will go for a toss. So a map actually enables some very critical use cases if you think about it, right? I mean, people don't realize that, but the fact that you can actually vertically scale these nodes is enabled by a map. Without that, you can only have so much of memory, right? Having said that, sometimes we abuse mmap because we forget that it's still a disk-based system, right? So you cannot use it for critical code paths, or you cannot use it where typically you have always depended on in-memory structures, right? So it's a double-edged sword. It will not go away unless you find a super efficient way of dealing with on-disk virtual mapping. It is here to stay. I think mmap adoption is growing, but it needs to be used with caution, which is actually true with any other new technology that you see. So yeah, don't use it for structures where you need absolute high performance or key value stores, which will work well just by storing in memory. But you cannot get rid of mmap. Otherwise, you will drastically see a cut down in the amount of data that a single process can actually ingest. So I think we are done. We would like to say some closing words.
Thanks, Atri. Thanks a lot, Bennett. I think it was a very, very interactive session and we went way out of time. So great problem to have. So thanks a lot, everybody. I mean, yeah, let's, I think people in the room, we can go for networking and spend some time. So this side, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we have snacks in the cafeteria this side, and yeah, so people who are in the office, yeah, we can definitely spend some time. So thanks everybody on the Zoom. Thanks everybody. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So I do see a request for sharing PPTs. I'll definitely post it on the Meetup link so that it's available for everybody. Thank you.